Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into a truly fascinating corner of firearms history and engineering. We're going to unpack insights from an audio source that gives us an up-close, really hands-on look at a very specific and iconic piece of machinery, the MAC-11.
Yeah, and our mission for this deep dive is really to explore the unique characteristics of the MAC-11. It's a firearm that's often, let's say, sensationalized in movies, but as our source reveals, it's far more complex and intriguing than its cinematic appearances might suggest.
Definitely.
We'll be extracting all the important nuggets from its, well, cinder block ergonomics, as the source put it, to its surprising legal classification.
And we've got a fantastic primary source today. It's a firearm enthusiast who quite literally rediscovered this particular MAC-11, a .380 Cobra model, just tucked away in his safe.
Wow, forgot he had it.
Yeah, exactly. And he shared his unvarnished experience from the real challenges of finding the right ammunition, believe it or not, to the sheer, almost unbelievable rate of fire. It's a deep dive into rediscovery and raw power.
Indeed. And this isn't just a technical overview. It feels more like a personal journey with a machine, highlighting both its, let's say, design peculiarities and its undeniable impact, even decades after it first came out.
So our source kicks things off by talking about this rediscovery, and he humorously notes how he forgot he had it and how long it's been since he brought it out. It immediately sets this tone of familiar discovery, like finding an old photo or something. What did you make of that initial impression?
Well, what's fascinating right off the bat is the immediate visual and tactile description he gives. He mentions how it looks pretty cool, which, it does have that certain look.
It does.
But he quickly contrasts that with its ergonomics of a cinder block, especially when you compare it to a traditional pistol or a handgun. You can almost feel how awkward it would be in your hand just from that description. It gives us a really tangible sense of its unique, almost brutalist design philosophy, form following a very direct function, perhaps.
Yeah, no kidding. And what I found particularly interesting was how he immediately connected it to pop culture, especially those movie references.
Oh, yeah, the gloves.
Right. Our source jokingly suggests you have to wear black leather gloves to shoot one, referencing films like Scarface. He even throws in John Wayne, kind of blending the practical with the theatrical.
It's just fun.
And then he actually tries shooting it without gloves just to test it out, proving that sometimes, well, reality doesn't quite match Hollywood's drama.
Exactly. And that anecdote really highlights the perception versus the reality, doesn't it?
Yeah.
While the gloves might be for cinematic effect, the actual design considerations, like that retractable stock he mentions, feels like an Uzi, but not quite the quality, he says. Those are key to understanding its functional form.
Right. It's pragmatic.
Yeah, a pragmatic design, maybe not refined by modern standards, sure, but clearly built for a specific and very, very direct purpose.
He also details the various safeties, which are surprisingly intricate for such a seemingly straightforward weapon. There's a runaround to fire safety, a trigger block safety that pushes rearward, and then the bolt handle itself turns 90 degrees to lock the bolt when it's closed.
Multiple steps.
Yeah, these practical details offer a glimpse into its operation and the specific procedures you'd need to follow just to get it ready to fire. It suggests that despite its raw power, some thought at least went into its mechanical safety mechanisms back then.
Absolutely. And those safeties, while maybe not intuitive today, they really speak to the design era. They reflect a more mechanical approach to safety, quite different from the more integrated and often passive safeties you find in many modern firearms. Adds another layer to its unique character,
Definitely. So beyond its initial quirks, what truly defines the MAC-11, as our source found out pretty quickly, is its staggering rate of fire.
Oh, yeah.
He describes emptying a magazine in no time at all, literally not much over a second. For, 31 or 32 rounds? It's almost unbelievable how quickly it cycles through ammunition.
It really is astonishing. And he breaks down the true cyclic rate, clarifying it's between 1,200 to 1,600 rounds per minute, which is just wow.
Yeah.
And he's very clear you won't actually fire that many in a minute because, well, magazines don't hold that much and they empty too fast, but that's the rate at which it cycles.
The potential speed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to put that in perspective, he says this is significantly quicker than other fully automatic firearms he's shot, things like the Semo or the Uzi, which might fire at maybe half that rate.
That's a huge difference. Imagine the sheer volume of lead just pouring out of the barrel in such a short span. But what happens when you combine that blistering speed with those cinder block ergonomics we just talked about?
Right.
How does something that fast actually handle?
Well, that raises a critical point, doesn't it? Even with a relatively low-power .380 round, the sheer volume of shots delivered so rapidly causes the firearm to torque and move. It really wants to try to move on you, as he puts it. He emphasizes that you have to hang pretty tight on it. Suggests a real wrestling match to maintain any kind of control.
So it's less about precision marksmanship.
Oh, much less. It's more about managing an almost explosive burst of energy.
Which means, as he puts it, you got to plan ahead what you want to shoot at because it's empty so fast. He even mentions trying to hit specific targets like a 2-liter bottle or a pizza pan, but admits, yeah, he wasn't really using the sights, and that burst fire is possible, but boy, does it throw them out.
Yeah.
It really paints this vivid picture of its chaotic power and the immense challenge of, well, any kind of precision with such a rapid-fire instrument. It's less aiming, more unleashing a torrent.
Exactly. Sounds like quite the adrenaline rush, maybe.
Yeah.
But probably not something you'd bring to a competition shoot.
Huh, probably not.
No, certainly not for precision. It just underscores that the MAC-11, by its very design and function, prioritizes volume of fire over accuracy or ease of control. It speaks to a very different philosophy of engagement than many modern firearms. It's a reminder that not all speed translates to practical utility in every scenario.
Right. Now, for a gun that shoots that fast, you'd think its primary need would just be a lot of ammo. Simple, right. But it turns out the MAC-11 is a bit particular about what it likes to eat. Our source recounts some significant functioning issues with certain types of ammunition.
Ah, the ammo saga, yeah.
It's not just a matter of having enough, it's about having the right kind.
He specifically mentions troubles with Tula .380 ammo, the steel case stuff, which he suspects caused initial problems. And what's fascinating here is the detailed account of his testing. He switches to brass-cased Remington ammo, which yields significantly better results.
Okay, so brass works better.
It seems so. It really highlights the importance of casing material and consistent manufacturing for reliable firearm operation. It's actually a common challenge with many firearms, especially older or more specialized designs, where slight variations in ammunition components can lead to malfunctions.
But the story doesn't end there. He also tries Blazer aluminum-cased ammo.
Oh, aluminum. How did that go?
Not well. He discovered it didn't like the Blazer at all. Sometimes it wouldn't even fire all the rounds or empty the magazine properly. He even remarks kind of jokingly that the gun knew that aluminum ammo was in there and simply refused to cooperate. It's almost like the gun has a personality, refusing certain foods.
Huh. Yeah, you hear that sometimes.
I've heard similar stories with other niche firearms. It seems compatibility can be a real headache, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It reminds me a bit of troubleshooting vintage cars. Sometimes it's not the big mechanical parts, but the tiny nuances of the fuel or oil type that make all the difference. This segment highlights a critical point about firearms. Even an impressive or, let's say, notorious design can be heavily reliant on the quality and type of ammunition it's fed.
And it also connects back to the design itself.
Right. It also reinforces the open bolt design, which our source reminds us requires careful checking for a round left in the chamber. With an open bolt, the chamber is only loaded when the trigger is pulled and the bolt slams forward. That changes typical safety protocols and handling, especially for someone used to a closed bolt system like most modern pistols and rifles.
So it's not just about what it does when it fires, but how it prepares to fire and how it reacts to different inputs, different ammo. That finickiness seems like a pretty significant operational detail.
It is, especially given its historical context, which leads us nicely to the broader picture here. The MAC-11 isn't just a powerful, fast-shooting machine. It has this rich history that dates back to its development by Gordon Ingram in the 1970s. It saw various configurations, including the Cobra model our source has, and was truly a product of its time, designed with specific, maybe less conventional needs in mind.
Our source points out that it was pretty popular at one point back in the 70s, 80s perhaps, even suggesting they were used by the CIA. Now, that gives it a significant historical weight beyond just being a fun range toy. It speaks to an era where this design was maybe considered cutting edge for certain applications. Do you think that CIA use thing is more like popular myth or historical fact?
It's probably a bit of a mix,
Yeah.
While a firearm like the MAC-11 being compact and having that high rate of fire might have been considered for clandestine or specialized operations.
Maybe evaluated.
Exactly, evaluate. But it's less than refined ergonomics, and those control issues we talked about might have limited any widespread actual adoption. More broadly, though, it represents a period of submachine gun design that really focused on simplicity and mass production. That concept was prevalent for military and law enforcement applications in the mid to late 20th century.
That makes sense. Sort of a brute force approach in some ways, but this raises an important question. What's its place today? Our source notes that more modern firearms have replaced the popularity of the MAC-11s, and he'd personally much rather have a Glock 18 if he could get one. It's a pretty candid admission that while the MAC-11 is iconic, technology has moved on quite a bit.
It's an interesting contrast he draws, isn't it? The Glock 18, a fully automatic pistol, renowned for its modern design, reliability.
But then there's the legal side.
Right. And here's the kicker on legality. Despite its age and being somewhat overshadowed by modern designs, the MAC-11 is a Class 3 weapon. This designation stems from the National Firearms Act of 1934, which is why it's subject to such strict federal regulation here in the U.S.
Which means, as our source humorously points out, you can't just walk into a store and buy one off the shelf for, $367 like maybe you could have decades ago. It requires extensive paperwork, a huge understatement, and significant funding. We're talking serious money now because of government regulation and limited supply of transferable machine guns.
A very limited supply.
The Glock 18, by contrast, he says you might not be able to get at any price, maybe not even for federal agents in some cases, whereas the MAC-11, this older design, is actually technically available to civilians.
Yeah.
If you have the considerable money and are willing to go through the proper, very arduous, time-consuming legal process. It's a fascinating paradox of availability, really.
It is. This comparison highlights a crucial insight into firearm regulation. It's often the legacy of a design's era, specifically being registered before the 1986 machine gun ban cutoff, rather than its modern utility or even perceived threat that dictates its civilian availability.
Right. The date matters hugely.
Hugely. It creates this paradoxical market where iconic, older firearms like the MAC-11 can be obtained by individuals with deep pockets and immense patience, while more advanced, perhaps even more practical designs like the Glock 18 remain almost universally restricted from civilian ownership. It speaks volumes about the historical and legal layers that govern firearm ownership.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean? Our deep dive into the MAC-11 reveals a firearm that is, well, undeniably cool in its own way. It has that staggering rate of fire and a fascinating, albeit somewhat convoluted, history.
Definitely has a coolness factor.
But it's not necessarily practical in all situations, right? Given its handling quirks and those ammo preferences we discussed. But as our source puts it, it's not bad to play with and kind of fun. It sounds like an experience almost more than just a tool.
I think that's a good way to put it. We've seen how its design, despite those cinder block ergonomics, creates a really distinct experience defined by sheer, unadulterated speed. We've also learned that while it's definitely a relic of its time, its legal status and peculiar availability make it an interesting case study in the world of firearms. It demonstrates the long-lasting impact of both design choices and, of course, regulation.
Ultimately, this deep dive reminds us that even objects from a specific era, like the MAC-11, carry all these layers: design choices, historical context, evolving perceptions. It's a reminder that sometimes the true nature of a tool, or really any piece of technology, is only fully understood when you get hands-on with its quirks and its history. It makes you wonder what other hidden gems are lurking out there waiting to be rediscovered.
Absolutely. So for you listening, what stands out when considering an object like the MAC-11? This older design with immense, almost unruly power, contrasted with its modern counterparts and the complex regulations that govern them today. What does it tell us about that ever-evolving balance between innovation, control, and maybe just the personal experience of handling a piece of history? Something to think about.